Starting your week with another episode of Cheers to Baseball, presented by our friends at Old Dominic. He's Chris Domino. I'm Kevin McAlpin. Chris, we're another week closer to opening day. We got about 2.5 weeks to go until they say play ball officially on the start of the 2024 season. Spring training, roster cuts have been happening throughout the game. We'll talk about some of the moves the Braves have made here coming up in just a few moments. But really, at this point, no surprises. I think when you start talking about the news out of Northport, nothing really eye-popping. And really, we're starting to get a better look, a better feel for what this opening day roster is going to look like here in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, a couple of the young guys had now officially been told it's not yet. Yeah. Remember, Bryce Elder was one of those guys last year who ended up making an all-star team. Not yet. You don't come with the big club. 26 guys. It's not going to be you, and it's not going to be you. Waldrop is one. Smith-Shaver's another. And now we'll find out as the Braves move it along. A little bit less crowded in the big league part of the clubhouse right now as they pare it down. And while work is still being done, I think people sort of hear that and you go, well, where do they send them? Well, they kind of don't really send them very far. It's just that you might see more work being done in the backfield.
Exactly right. And I think what this also leads to the speculation of, we've talked about Reynaldo Lopez. Yeah. Is he a starter? Is he a reliever? The Braves have been stretching him out. They've said all spring training, we're going to look at him as a starter. And it feels like, I don't know how you feel about it, but if I'm looking into my crystal ball, I'd probably give Reynaldo Lopez an inside track at being that fifth starter, at least to start the year.
Yeah, and the other part, too, is, look, Bryce Elder hit a wall last year, and everybody talks about that. And the exceptional guys are the ones who, everyday player, 120 games, whew, I'm a little bit tired. Pitchers a certain amount of innings. Maybe it's amount of starts. It's the mental strain and the physical strain. So you're going to actually try to maybe avoid a little bit of that. But the Lopez thing to me is just basic math. If I stretch him out now, it's easier at some point if I feel the need or want to move him into the bullpen as opposed to making him a bullpen guy. Then all of a sudden, something that goes a little bit kaflooey, end of April, middle of May, and now I got to play that. Now I have to stretch him out game. It just seems easier to play this course of events than actually putting a guy to the bullpen that you thought, if equal, doesn't it make more sense? Because we know where he's going to land. A fifth starter who doesn't do well, guess where he's going? He's going back down. Yeah. Lopez has a place. He's staying with the club. He's just moving out there.
And I think what I like about this move as well is, and I was kind of against it, to be honest with you, a couple of months ago. I said, well, if he's been as dominant as he has out of the bullpen, I would kind of just like to leave him there. But, Chris, I think you have so many other dominant arms in that pen where you can say, you know what, start the season in there, start the season in the rotation. And this also allows a Hurston Waldrop, a A.J. Smith-Shaver, a Bryce Elder, whoever it might be, to get a few more starts at AAA. I've always been a big believer. A little extra seasoning in the minors doesn't hurt anybody either.
Yeah, and look, you hate to say it, but Bobby Cox was the first one I ever heard say it, certainly locally, and Brian Snitker has ridden with it forever. These things have a way of working out. Yeah. And a lot of times that's not good news. You know, it's the infamous, God answers every prayer. Sometimes the answer is no. When somebody says it'll all work itself out, you can have the upbeat part of that. Wow, look at that. It worked itself out. But there's the other part of that. Will you have 7 starters or 8 starters? What are you going to do with them all? Don't worry. Don't worry. You probably don't even have 8, but you better have 8 if you're actually thinking about filling 5 spots.
Well, let's be honest. The Braves had 7 or 8 starters last year, and then they used 16 of them. Yeah. So, I mean, the best laid plans can still go out the window very, very quickly.
A couple of quick notes. Dave Roberts has said that Mookie Betts is going to be the starting shortstop. Yeah. So that's a piece of news that came out this weekend. How incredible is it that you have a guy who can play that many positions, can hit at the top of your lineup and be an MVP candidate. God bless Mookie Betts in that regard, because he offers flexibility that a lot of guys don't offer their team. No matter how good Freddie Freeman hits, he's a first baseman, unless you think about the time he spent at third base here. There's only a certain amount of things you can do. Mookie Betts is actually the guy that you go, if there's something that happens, guess what? They could move him if they needed to. Yeah. But Dave Roberts wanted to settle that before the season gets started. The other one was, I found it interesting, Juan Soto hasn't taken an official at-bat with the New York Yankees. But you know what the headline in New York screamed this weekend?
What's that?
Mets inactivity in 2024 leads everyone to believe that Juan Soto will sign a $400 million plus deal with the Mets in 2025. Now, I'm not saying it's unprecedented. We did it with Ohtani. We did it with Bryce Harper. We've done it with guys where you try to figure out, hey, what's going to happen a year from now? Maybe even a little bit longer. But that one was interesting because this guy hasn't taken an at-bat in New York with the Yankees, which is supposed to be the headline every day. Yeah. Juan Soto, New York Yankee. Well, Met fans wanted to get in on it a little bit and say, I think our guy not signing Alonso, this looks to and points to the idea that in 2025, Soto's actually going to be playing for the Mets.
Look, to be honest with you, and again, I'm not a Soto hater. I don't see maybe what others do. Maybe it's just me. I hear all this generational talent. Yeah, he gets on base a lot. He draws a lot of walks. He's got a great OBP. But at the end of the day, I need to see a couple of seasons. If I'm talking about a $400 million player, I need to see some 40-homer seasons. And I'll be honest with you, short porch in right field, this might be just what the doctor ordered for a guy like Soto heading into his free agent season.
Oh, this is
big. Yeah.
This is laid out perfectly because this is a guy who now, look, do I want a guy who will occasionally walk because the situation dictates it? Yeah. But I always thought Frank Thomas walked too much. If you're the best bat in the lineup, swing the bat. Juan Soto, did he turn down $440 million? That's the number that was reported from Washington. Remember, that's $440 a few years ago.
Yeah.
The money's probably gone down. Now he has a chance in the most incredible spot of all. Now, look, the only thing that could be missing is a postseason appearance if the Yankees don't pitch well enough, or if Stanton or Judge get hurt, or if he gets hurt, or if Garrett Cole goes down. There's no guarantee that he's going to be playing in October. But if it was ever set up for a guy in a ballpark to have a free agency year to push his money back up, you would think Juan Soto is going to be playing they don't pay you to walk off the island. Right. You don't get off the island by walking off the island. I think that might be his mindset this year.
Well, heck, I mean, those porches are so short that Giancarlo Stanton completely changed his stance to try to just throw the bat head out there and go to right center field.
All right, what a segue, because those were a couple of news and notes things. There's going to be more before camp breaks. Braves make a couple of moves. The Betts thing, shortstop Juan Soto. Is he going to be playing for the Mets next year? All that stuff is in play. Speaking of changing the stance, about a week and a half ago, somebody threw Jerry Kelnick's spring training numbers at me, and they weren't good. And it didn't take much to lift them up because they weren't very heavy. There wasn't a lot there. But I kind of thought, okay, they got him for a reason. And one of the reasons is they looked at the strikeout numbers at 30-something%. And they said, well, that's too high. What are they going to do? My belief was, don't worry about his spring training numbers, because I think Kevin Seitzer and Jarred Kelenic are probably working on something. You tell me, if you look at this, if there's any physical evidence of what you see maybe as a difference between Jarred Kelenic, the guy who struck out a lot, and maybe the guy they're actually going to ask to make contact, but he hasn't picked up exactly what it is he wants or needs to do.
Yeah, so for context, this is Jarred Kelenic video from a year ago, obviously still a member of the Seattle Mariners. You see how high his hands are, basically at his ears, essentially, is how high he is. You mentioned some adjustments. Seitz loves to work with these guys. He did it with Ronald, lowering his hands a little bit.
Michael Harris a little bit, too.
Yeah, exactly. Now you fast forward to this spring training. Look how much different. I mean, that's not even, that's night and day.
And I'm assuming that's contact.
Yeah.
I'm assuming that's drive the ball. They obviously preach hard contact here. Kevin Seitzer is a guy who says, if you barrel it, you hit it, stuff will happen. If you're striking out 30% of the time, you've taken away and you've eliminated way too many opportunities, not just for yourself, but for the team.
Right.
And what did this team do last year? In 2 years, they jumped from one of the worst strikeout teams in baseball. Why did they put up the offensive numbers last year? Because there were more competitive at-bats, more balls in play, because they struck out so much fewer times. This, to me, was probably what I was thinking about. Now it looks like there's visual evidence.
Yeah, I think the number was 5th most strikeouts in baseball 2 years ago, 5th fewest last year. That is a drastic turnaround, and I still feel like conversations have had to happen behind the scenes somewhere. You got to pull Kelenic aside. Look, we'd love for you to hit 30 bombs. We don't need you to hit 30 bombs. Like, just be you. This offense is going to do the heavy lifting for you.
Put the ball in play, get on base. And again, I just sort of sensed that when they looked at him, talent and what it is they want, what it is they're going to try to pull out of him, there are times when, whether it's Chris Sale, well, what are we going to do? And not only that, we're going to give him the second year because we think he's not only healthy, but he's the right guy for us. I think they got this guy looking at that number, and it was glaring that he struck out as often as he did. But two things. Look, I think he was mind blanked. I think he'll tell you. The conversation, we had to sit down at Fan Fest with him, and part of it was when you're on a 5-game losing streak and everybody's saying you need to do more, well, doing more for a younger guy sometimes is counterproductive to actually doing more.
Right.
I think this guy's settling in. I think maybe with the new game plan, what an at-bat plan is, take your natural tools and use them. Let it flow a little bit more freely. This is why I didn't really care about the numbers. Now, I guess he got a hit yesterday in the first at-bat, and Twitter sort of, social media went fake. Yeah, he's on base. He's got another couple of weeks to get comfortable with what it is I think he's trying to do.
And let's be honest, when that team comes home, he's got one hell of a guy he can pick his brain in Chipper Jones, who has worked with these guys. I mean, look what he did, the turnaround with Austin Riley and others. I got a feeling you're going to see Kelenic nuzzling up to old number 10 once the Braves get back from their first road trip.
Yeah, one other thing about the first homestand is April 8th. We'll talk a little bit more about this coming up, the 50th anniversary of Hank Aaron's 715th home run. It's going to be in the news. And I said this when Bonds was going after the number. The best thing about it is people will look at Hank Aaron's career again, and they will start to see how many hits he had. What was his lifetime, slugging? Well, he never really did this, never hit 50 home runs. But what he did do is this. I do like when something milestone-ish approaches that somebody – there has been times when Stan Musial's gotten looked at again because people said, look, this is kind of crazy, 3,600 hits. How many hits is that? And you go, wow, it's a lot. And then you start to look at the select category and Stan Musial's in it. Let's take a look at Stan Musial's career. I think that's what's going to happen with Hank for that week leading up to it. People are going to realize 50 years is a long time. Like a half a century when you're talking about anything is a long time. But it's not in the dark ages where we don't have video of it. We don't have the call. We don't have everything else. And I do think it's going to be really interesting as the Braves get ready for that night. And it's a Monday night. There's a bobblehead. Did you see the bobblehead yet?
I did not, no.
It's Hank Aaron standing at home plate holding the ball above his head,
way.
which is sort of what actually happened. He got the ball before the celebration left home plate from out of the bullpen. So, yeah, I'm just looking forward to it and what the Braves are going to do that night.
Yeah.
Once they get home for the first weekend.
The only thing that's going to be missing is Hank, Vin Scully, who called it. Yeah. There's other
Al Downing, I think, is going to be here.
Okay, and of course Craig Sager, who was right in the middle of it. Yeah. Can you imagine that now? A milestone home run and a reporter just jumping down onto the field and sticking him. I mean, how the times have changed, right?
Yeah. Well, might have been Amanda. Amanda, were you looking at the video when the two guys came on the field? And she said, I said, Amanda, let me tell you a story. There were snipers in the building. Yeah. Those guys were lucky they didn't get clipped. Yeah. I almost think the reason they didn't get clipped is they were so close to Hank at that point that maybe you don't want to start firing. But there was snipers in the building for that because the death threats and everything else. Those guys got very lucky that nothing happened to them. And I think had they decided to pick them off as they were coming in from the outfield, that could have been something that really could have happened. Yeah, it really could have. And it's one of the most iconic moments in baseball history. I think one of those gentlemen has passed away as well.
I think so.
I think one is still alive. I'm assuming if he's up for it, you bring him back into the building as well.
You think you get him to run again?
Well, I don't know if you can get him to run that far. Or maybe at the speed that he caught up to Hank rounding second. But, yeah, I do think it's going to be a hell of a celebration.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Hey, real quick, let's talk a little free agency. We know there's still some big names that are still out there on the market, but you had brought up an interesting point before we started hitting record on this thing about some big-time free agents that ended up in other places, that ended up Look, we know they're not all going to work out, right? You know, some of these things are going to be flops, but, I mean, Randy Johnson, Arizona to New York.
Let me start with Greg Maddux. Sure. Greg Maddux was interesting because the Yankees had offered him more money. Yeah. Reggie Jackson was interesting. Randy Johnson's interesting. But with Greg Maddux, one of the things that feather in a cap, if you're going to rank free agent signings, let's say of the last 35, 40 years, Ohtani was the biggest star that we've seen in a long time. He might be the biggest star since maybe Reggie Jackson, who we'll talk about in a second. Maddux had an opportunity to take more. Randy Johnson had offers to make more money as well before he went to Arizona. But did you know, and I think I'm right about this, he pitched 4 years in Arizona, 4 Cy Youngs, and a World Series, the only World Series in their history. So if you want to talk about how good a free agent signing can be, I'm not telling you Randy Johnson is definitively the best, but if you talk about bang buck, 4 Cy Youngs plus the World Series, it's hard to believe that there have been many better than Randy Johnson going to Arizona.
He was a mean dude on the mat. Like I cannot even imagine. What was he, 6'8", 6'9"-ish? But he was so long, he was so late, and the way the ball, when it leaves his hand, and you've heard hitters talk about this, it feels like he releases it and it's on you. Like there's that time where that ball travels is cut in half, it feels like, with a guy like Randy Johnson.
But it's a rejuvenation that every once in a while you go, did I get bang for my buck? 4 years, 4 Cy Youngs, plus a World Series title, plus a World Series co-MVP. You know, that's about as good as it's going to get. Yeah. And again, Maddux here because of the World Series for the Braves, helping get them over the top. That one fits into that category as well. The Reggie Jackson one, this side of Shohei Ohtani, I don't know if there was anybody bigger or more famous. Ohtani because of today's the day, Johnson because of his career numbers and everything he did. People sort of forget he did a little bit of I'm here, offered a little bit more money, went to a place that didn't have a title. You know, he didn't go title chasing because that's not what they had in Arizona. It's not like they had a couple of them. They needed him to get there, Kurt Schilling to be there. So it's a really interesting dynamic when you talk about Johnson being as good as it got when it comes to signing for the money that he did.
I'm glad you brought up Curt Schilling, a guy who started his career in Philadelphia and was the only thing that Phillies team had. He goes and partners up with a guy like Randy Johnson. And that was, you want to talk about 1-2 punches and what they did in the postseason. And I'm looking at this video right now. Imagine being a hitter and all you see is the eyes glaring over the. Nobody does that anymore. Oh. Nobody does that intimidation thing. Jacob deGrom does a little bit, right?
Andy Pettit actually was a eyes over the glove type guy too.
Yeah.
So when you talk about free agency, Ohtani's a star and he signed in a star place with the Dodgers. If we go to Reggie, this idea that Reggie Jackson, people forget, I don't think there's been, and I'm old enough to say this, I don't know if there's been a more bigger name, bigger guy. And remember this with Reggie, the Yankees hadn't won in over a dozen years. So you have to have the World Series title if you're going to include what free agent signing means for you. And if you're going to give me the top 10, there better be a payoff other than WAR, number of wins. You better have the World Series title. And Reggie ate this stuff up.
Yeah.
And look, Reggie, if social media was around in the mid-'70s when he went to New York, it was crazy with just newspapers.
Yeah.
This would have been unbelievable.
Yeah.
Reggie Jackson in New York, because he had the line that, again, if you're old enough, I'm the straw that stirs the drink. That is sort of ballsy. And then the Reggie bar comes about, and then the Billy Martin stuff, and then the fight with this guy, fight with that guy. What's happening? It was insane before social media. Can you imagine what it would be today?
And I know you've had a chance to meet Reggie over the years. I met him at spring training, 7 or 8 years ago. We were playing the Yankees at Steinbrenner Field. Me and Ben Ingram are having lunch, and he walks by the cafeteria, and I'm going, dude, there's Reggie. He goes, come on, let's go get a picture. He was super nice, but to me, what blew me away, we said we're with Braves Radio, and he goes, were you guys calling the game yesterday on Sirius XM? I said, yes, sir. He goes, I was driving listening to you fellas. You guys did a great job. I'm like, holy cow, Reggie Jackson was. And so I was immediately like blown away. But he's not a big dude. You think that this guy with that power he had was a big guy? Not overly tall in stature.
Harmon Killebrew was the one I talk about all the time. Sort of surprised me that he was my size. Harmon Killebrew was my size. Reggie Jackson is smaller than Willie Randolph.
Yeah.
There's a Yankee picture going around now that Reggie Jackson is smaller than Willie Randolph. I want you to think about that. That's not generational. Willie Randolph's not a guy who played in the 2020s. He played with him.
Yeah.
And Reggie Jackson is now smaller than Willie Randolph. So, and I met Reggie a couple of times, but one of the nights was the night that the Braves clinched the World Series in Houston. He works for the Astros.
He does.
People don't even know this. So I saw Reggie on the street corners. We were leaving the building. We spent 15 minutes talking. We had Phil Garner on the show, and Phil Garner played with Reggie in Oakland. When Phil Garner came up, Charlie Finley tried to screw him out of $5,000. And Phil Garner, unsolicited, without knowing I was obviously going to see Reggie that night, told the story of Reggie went to Charlie Finley and said, you're screwing the guy. Give him his money. And Charlie Finley gave him the $5,000 that he owed him. He said it was all because Reggie went to him and said so. So I told Reggie that story that night where I think a 3-minute conversation turned into 15 because I said, hey, I just got to tell you something Phil Garner told me today. And then we ended up talking quite a bit about the Braves, and he offered congratulations. Look, he certainly wanted his guys to win, but he certainly appreciated what the Atlanta Braves had done that night in Houston.
Yeah, well, and it's funny because he had a reputation of being a bit of a hard ass, bit of a tough guy to deal with, but again, maybe he's mellowed out as he's gotten older.
No, I've told my Reggie story. He was on the banned list. We used to do this thing called the banned list where people I don't want to talk to. And Reggie was on the banned list because there was a Yankee-Braves World Series in '99, and, the media gets to get on the field to watch BP, and it was pretty crowded. I mean, it was New York. It was Yankee Stadium. Reggie's in there in his uniform. Whatever he's doing for the Yankees at that point, he's got his uniform on, and he starts telling the media, hey, man, back off. My guys need to get their work in. It was my guys. But it was just sort of showy. And I just said, come on, what are you doing? Let these guys have their moment. This is a team that was looking to win their third World Series in the 90s.
Right.
So I just thought it was a little bit much. Then I realized, okay, this is why.
Yeah.
The guy did it in New York.
Right.
Like the infamous, if you can do it in New York, you can do it any place. Nobody's really done it better. It wasn't without incident, but nobody's really done it better than Reggie in New York.
Yeah. Well, I enjoyed our conversation with him. I know he's a guy that's obviously a baseball encyclopedia, and we could spend, you can talk about baseball reference pages and Reggie and all he accomplished. And we just saw that the big World Series game when he tied Babe Ruth's record. We could go on and on about it. But I think what ultimately it shows you is, some of these things do work out. Some of them don't, and that's just sort of the nature of the business, too.
I'll give you one quick one, though. So let's bring it back to the Atlanta Braves. I don't know what Matt Olson's going to eventually do. You got to be a title winner. You got to be. The 54 home runs was phenomenal. The idea that he had 134 with 127 runs scored and didn't have a chance to win the MVP because of his own teammate is incredible to me.
Yeah.
But Matt Olson, at some point, you sign him for good money, but it is that idea that you're here, trading for him was sort of interesting. Who really is going to hit free agency for this team? Because to me, the best signing that they've had, Travis d'Arnaud.
Yeah.
Was Travis d'Arnaud part of free agency? He wasn't a trade.
He was a free agent, yeah.
The first contract he signed.
Yeah.
If you really think about it, has there been a better signing free agent? Was Charlie Morton?
He was a free agent.
So Charlie Morton, Travis d'Arnaud are kind of the group here that were free agent signings. This team really hasn't had a lot of them.
No.
Ronald, Michael, Ozzie.
Spencer Strider. They're all good.
Was a trade. Austin Riley was a draft.
Yeah.
So Sean Murphy, trade. It is interesting. We haven't really dipped into the free agent market and had it work hugely because you've done enough of the ingrown stuff.
And like you said, the nice part about that is all those guys we just mentioned are under long-term deals, so we really don't have to worry about it. And we know Ronald is already banging the drum about wanting to be here for his whole career. He's already starting that with, 4 or 5 years left of control on that deal. He's already making that known, which I'll be honest with you, I love it. I know he's probably trying to get himself a new deal, but I love the fact that we're already hearing that because how rare is that in the game right now that you hear guys that say, I want to spend my whole career in one place. Hell, look at Joey Votto. I bet you ultimately Joey Votto wanted to land back in Cincinnati no matter what. He does go back to, he goes to Toronto, so at least he's going to his home country. But again, a guy like Joey Votto is not going to spend his whole career in one uniform.
I'll give you one more. Alex Anthopoulos is signed until 2031. So, look, you can't stop a guy. I think he's president, CEO. No, he's not CEO. President, baseball ops, general manager, czar of baseball, whatever his title is. The only thing I'm nervous about is if an expansion team ever came along and said, we want you and here's part ownership. Because Theo Epstein, I think, is the only other guy in baseball that I would think would have an opportunity to be told by a new group, we'd like you to run the whole thing. I told the story. Billy Martin, his son told me that Billy, speaking of Arizona, Billy was offered the job when Arizona was going to come into play to be a guy who worked behind the scenes for a year, then was going to run it.
Wow.
And he said no. He gets killed in the crash. He was coming back to manage the Yankees. But Arizona wanted him to actually be part of the startup situation with the Diamondbacks. So, there's stories. But Alex Anthopoulos is signed until 2031 as well. Yeah,
and it's nice to know because he's done one hell of a job putting this thing together. Braves are looking to win their 7th consecutive division title, and we'll see if they can get a little bit closer to that. 2 weeks from Thursday, by the way.
I don't want to get in trouble for this one. Tell me again what it is they're looking to do.
Win a World Series.
No. Before that.
Yeah, they're going to win 7th because you don't care. Yeah. Well, that's just step one, I guess, is my point. Yeah, division titles are great. Those parades are a lot more fun, aren't they? That parade day was, we need to do that again.
Yeah.
That was a lot of fun.
I think this town's probably ready for it.
I think it is, too. You know what I'm ready for? I'm ready for a cocktail. I got to tell you, I was at the baseball field all weekend, Max and the boys out there. Now, I told them, I said, we are the best 0-3 team I have ever coached in my life. We got walked off back-to-back games, but I went home last night. I actually dipped into some of the old Dominic cask strength 117 bourbon last night and had a couple of nightcaps. So cheers to the boys. Cheers to the Rowdy Royals. And we're going to get our first win coming up on Thursday. But, Chris, whether you're looking to celebrate, whether you're looking for something to enjoy with some of the fellas or you're getting some people over for dinner, I can't recommend Old Dominic products in my life.
In Atlanta, it's going to get a little chilly again. It looks like for another little stretch. Again, Monday night, 2 fingers worth. You're going to be watching whatever it is you're going to be watching, just enjoying, waiting for Braves baseball to begin in earnest as spring training wraps up.
You also have basketball all weekend, all day, all week. I mean, you've got the tournament, you got Selection Sunday, you've got March Madness. You got a lot of great. I mean, this is, I don't know about you, like I've been known to throw a few bucks on games at times, but like conference games, conference tournaments starting at like 11 a.m. Yeah. This is spelling bad news for me being home.
No, it could be interesting.
Yeah.
Could be interesting. I'm very much college basketball has kind of bored me the last couple of years, to be very honest, but I do sort of get it stoked again as these conference tournaments get on. But certainly by the time next week comes, and I'm going to be playing basketball a week from Thursday for the NCAA tournament, I'm all in. Yeah, so if you were looking to throw a little party, maybe have some guys over or gals over or both, load up on the Old Dominic. You will not be disappointed. All right, Amanda, you good? I'm great. All right, our weekly check-in, you good? She's good. All right, she's good. She's good. We're good. She's great. She got promoted. What do you mean? She's doing great. Oh, yeah.
She got promoted. She should get a bottle of Old Dominic.
Oh, yeah.
She went to,
She's out. She went to Nashville. Okay. We'll talk about that later.
Yeah, that'll be on next week's show. Stay tuned for that. Hey, you're going back down to spring training, so you'll have some more coverage for us next weekend, right?
That is correct. So I'll be on regular show here in Atlanta, 680 The Fan, 680 The Fan app from 11 to 2, but I'll be doing it down from spring training, I think Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday at least. Then I'll be down Saturday night. They got a 6:05 game. Sunday, they've got a game. There's a day off, actually, in the beginning of that week. Yeah. And I think what's going to happen is we're trying to set it up now where we'll have a couple of the pitchers who are going to be in the building throwing because they have sessions. I think I'll grab a couple of those guys on that day, too.
Well, there you go.
It's not really an off day in spring training.
Yeah, not really. Yeah, make sure you
follow. Kind of an off day.
Some guys will have an off day.
Yeah,
Some guys will be hitting the little white ball. Yeah.
But I think there are going to be a couple of guys who probably have to get their throwing in.
So make sure you follow 680 The Fan on social media. Chris will have you covered from Braves camp in Northport. Meanwhile, we'll do this again next week. We'll just be 2 weeks away from opening day. In the meantime, thanks again to Old Dominic. For Chris, I'm Kevin. We'll see you next week on another edition of Cheers to Baseball.